Yo, so I'm doing this for the first time, but I hope I'm live. So thanks to all of you who are currently watching. I've seen that the celebrities are already here. So some known faces. So hello, Enea. Nice that you joined. Also, Evgeny. Hello. And also Ole Bibi. I hope that I pronounced this correctly. Also welcome. Very welcome. Yo, so as I said, it's my first live stream. The idea was that we kind of present here certain things together with the guests, certain issues which are a little bit more complicated, but which are common use cases you find in reality. So what I mean is, usually when you look at documentations, when you read articles, when you watch videos, for example, you see kind of examples which are made to be very easy, unless you try it out for the first time in real life. And this is exactly what we are doing right here. I am not alone. Before we also, another guest. Hello. I'm not alone. I've invited Michael Small. Hello, Michael. Maybe a few words from my side. I know Michael, or I met actually Michael at NGConf last year. And Michael is actually very active. So if you are, for example, looking for some answers, if you're writing something in the Reddit forums, then you will definitely have already stumbled upon some of Michael's comments. He's very active there. He's also an author for the Angular space. He's also one of my secret sources for the NG News. He's telling me a few things every week. And he's also a contributor to the NGRX toolkit. So today's topic will be about the NGRX, and Michael has already also contributed some things there as well. Michael, do you want to introduce yourself and maybe want to say a little bit what we want to do today?
Yeah, so thank you for the introduction, Rainer. So a little bit about me. Yeah, I'm very active on Reddit. I'm kind of a repo watcher of various things. I know I saw Nia here, so we're often, it's like who shows up to like a PR within the first 5 minutes or so. But now beyond that, I am a lead front-end developer at Relationship One, just marketing automation stuff, and our stack has been Angular since about Angular 7. And so I'm in charge of dozens of Angular applications in a shared library in our Angular monorepo. And we're still making apps, still doing various things. And as time has evolved, we've had different needs in our state management and whatnot. So this stream is sort of my findings from my exploration of how can I streamline one of the most basic things that we do all the time, which is just, CRUD in, CRUD out over HTTP, create, read, update, delete. And how do we do that with the SignalStore?
You might think it's simple, but then in the end, it turns out not to be that simple all the time. Yeah, and you're also an active user of the SignalStore, although I'm not sure, are you use it already in production in your applications, or do you just play with it?
Yes. So we just a little bit of context for the most part. For historically for our apps, we've done a combination of NGXS and services with a subject, or these days when we use them with a signal, or both. But then we had a greenfield project starting about 17, and we pulled in the component store. Just because the SignalStore wasn't quite there. But towards the end of the project, by the time it was 18, we did pull in the SignalStore for production use, as well as the NGRX toolkit. And it is, for the most part, in that application, is for our global state, especially because of the toolkits. Your what is it, with browser sync or with storage
storage thing, yes.
Yeah, and that syncs up local storage and session storage, which is really nice for our global stuff, as well as the with dev tools feature, which allows us to hook into our dev tools. Sorry if you heard a Slack come on from my side. Anyways, so yeah, I pulled it in because of that, and it was more mature by that point too. So, but now our apps, as of us upgrading to like 19 in our main repo, are starting with everything for the most part, apart from a couple services, using the SignalStore.
I see. Yeah, great. So do you want to share your screen and kind of tell us a little bit about the actual problem, challenge, however you want to call it?
Yeah.
Okay. Then I've already put your screen on stage as well.
Cool. Okay. So this is our project that Reiner and I will be syncing on. But first, I will pull up my slideshow. Oh, and we should first, before I get deep into this, should you drop a link to like the repo in the chat or put it in the comments or something?
Yes, I will. I think it's the link that you have sent me before.
Yeah, the GitHub link to NGRX SignalStore feature conditional.
Yes. I will do this. And meanwhile, you can continue explaining the project.
And just about any link is in that README. This is just one branch, including a link to even a stack blitz for anybody. So including these slides as well. So I'm going to roughly do this around our slides here. I'm move this to other screen. There we go. Okay.
And by the way, so the way how it usually works when someone's doing a stream, whenever someone has a question or a comment, then just put it into the chat, and I will highlight it at an appropriate time. Okay.
Cool. Okay. So I picked one of the first Google Slides things I like, whatever this theme is. So the conditional SignalStore feature, like what if you don't want everything in some sort of too good to be true situation? What do I mean by that? Here are also the links it's also in the slides. So I'd say, at least in my case, and probably a lot of other pieces or a lot of other code bases, 90% of our stores relate to like CRUD over HTTP. Again, that's create, read, update, delete, and cover your ears, Reiner. I know you're on the NGRX team, but yes, there is boilerplate with that. I know the dirty word, but still. But it happens anywhere, no matter like what you're using, no matter if you're using subject into service, like any tool, like it's going to be there, and you're always going to want to chip away at it. Because I'm like, with something so fundamental as CRUD over HTTP, like I feel like, why can't it just be a solved issue and just be a really slick and easy thing to do? And so that is what I set out to do. And to give a reference back to the NGRX toolkit, the idea, and I'll pull up the page for that.
Yeah, probably. I mean, in the meantime, I can add a little bit. The NGRX store, the core library, already provides the with entities. So if someone of the viewers is not so used to use the SignalStore, so there are some basic functions available, but there is nothing there which is doing the synchronization with your backend. What, for example, like what Angular Query is doing. So we don't have anything there, and because of that, there are now other separate extensions. Inea is asking if you can zoom in a little bit.
Should be good. It's at about 150. Is that all good?
I hope so.
Okay. So my first attempt at dealing with this CRUD boilerplate was when I found the NGRX toolkit. The first thing that really, just blew my mind and showed me the strength of the SignalStore custom features is the with data service. Basically, when you import that, like Reiner said, like you have your with entities, which provide like a lot of things like out of the box for dealing with various things. You have this like flight booking model here. You put in the with data service custom feature that you import there, and you point to a service that service will implement an interface that the with data service expects. And then in particular, you also can throw in a filter that some endpoints will use. And then also the snippet showcases some other power of the toolkit, like an undo redo feature for your state. And with call state, which has stuff like you can have like loading state built in. When you do your calls, it'll say it's loading, not loading anymore, I believe pending or something like that. So in just this snippet of a SignalStore with a lot of these toolkit features, what do you get? I'll jump to the end here. With just those lines, the store automatically exposes a filter. It exposes the entities, the flights here, a selected entity, the IDs of them, the loading state of them, and then those undo redo we threw in there to show that you can undo or redo something. It automatically exposes a load method, an undo redo method there, and then updating various things like what is the selected flight, or updating the filter and whatnot. And you can also throw in a custom key if you want to have a more specialized name than just entities or selected entities. So you put in the name of the collection here, the flights. This is a pretty similar one, but the call state also specifies it's a flight. The undo redo specifies it's a flight. And so here you have your flight filter, selected flight entities, selected flight IDs, flight loading, so on and so forth. Update flight filter. And so that's really powerful. But, and this is sort of the crux of my inspiration for this, is let's see what this requires. And showing you this here, this really is not a lofty requirement either, but requires an interface where the data service, that is the interface that the with data service feature requires, and you pass in the type in a generic. So these are flights, and then the type for your filter, the flight filter. And then with the toolkit, it then assumes that all of these things are promises, like the load by ID gets a flight that with a promise, load, create, update, delete, update all, and so on and so forth. This would be the general state of your services that are expected to be able to use with data service. And again, that's pretty reasonable. For all of that power, for all of those methods out of the box, loading state, do all this CRUD stuff, so on and so forth. In practice, especially like in our apps, we don't fulfill all CRUD stuff all the time. We have a lot of just read-only things. Or we have some things that are maybe like read and then update. Often, we may not have like delete endpoints, or at least like exposed publicly for the front end and stuff like that. So it wasn't really viable for us to be able to fulfill this data service interface. And I was really crushed. I was like, oh man, this is just so perfect. But this is part of the branding of this talk is like where code meets reality, and this is where I was like, you know what, I can do it. And so I DM Reiner and I was like, I have some ideas here. Can you help me out on this? And he's like, sure, send me over a stack blitz. And I thought back on a different approach that was like this that I saw at the time as a starting basis. And so I'll pull up another thing to put over that link here. I can make this larger too. This article extending the NGRX SignalStore with a custom feature by Fabian of Offering Solutions. This is, I will say, if you want a substantial walkthrough through a like a SignalStore feature for something that is really practical, this is one of the best resources I have seen just in general. It is very to the point, very straightforward, but you achieve a lot. And essentially, you are doing the same thing as the with data service, without some of the bells and whistles there. But and it also uses observables. But as they point out, you could just as easily use promises. So just to give an overview of this, because we will be building our customization off of this. Same sort of thing. Like, hey, like why can't we do this? This CRUD stuff. In a lot more straightforward way. So you have your basic SignalStore state, computed, methods, hooks, and so on. You should be able to throw in this custom feature called with CRUD operations, and very similar to the with data service. Sorry, jumped around tabs. It will expect something with an ID for our entity, the base entity, and then whatever type you want from that. Pretty common to see like to-dos for like a to-do app. Just has to extend that to include that ID of a string, or if your places uses numbers, you can adapt that and so on. So that's one of the requirements from this, that you have an ID to key off of. And then similar to the with data service, you have your interface like this with the generic, get items, shows that you could do it with the promise if you want in this implementation. You could do it with a mix of them, whatever you choose to do. And then, you implement that one in here. And this will look very similar to our starting thing, because this is basically that. All the CRUD stuff there. So how do we go about implementing this? First thing with SignalStore features is you give it a name, you return a SignalStore feature, and then essentially it has just the same stuff as a normal non-featured SignalStore with methods, with computed, and so on. So we need some methods for this, and there's some computed state.
Michael, does this also internally call with entities, or do you also have to call that one separately as it is in the data service?
There is, this feature does not use entities.
Okay.
It uses the terminology, so I know that's a little. I've taken to, even after looking into your with data services, and I learned about entities in NGRX. I've taken to that language, even though we don't specifically use the with entities.
I see.
So yeah, this doesn't, for anyone who's familiar with that, this doesn't actually use with entities, but just sort of as a stand-in for whatever kind of stuff you're doing. These will be to-dos in this instance, and then also my examples. So you have, you then need to have a base state of, you have your items, which is those generic entities, and then a loading state, which is a Boolean. And so we then flesh out the SignalStore more to expect this entity of a base entity. And then the way that you can parameterize this in SignalStore features, is that you have this little type helper, and then you pass in your base state of an entity. Scrolling down a bit more, you can then parameterize, throw in the data service that you can expect to fulfill this CRUD service of whatever entity type. And again, you have this this type helper here that just helps glue the types together.
Yeah, maybe can you go a little bit back, because maybe this is a feature not everyone's aware of the SignalStore, especially if you start learning the SignalStore. I think you will not encounter that one so quickly. This input constraint, or the first parameter of the SignalStore feature, that is very crucial, because as you said correctly before, you can say this is an extension, but you cannot apply it to any SignalStore you want. The SignalStore needs to fulfill certain requirements, and it needs to have in the state that certain type. And I think what is also important there is that the SignalStore type is lowercase, and the other one, the data service type, is uppercase. So there are these are two different things. Not so easy.
Yeah, and if you want, if this is like your first exposure to SignalStore custom features, I'll really quick here pull up the docs. I really love the docs for the SignalStore in general. A more basic example of the stuff that I pulled into my apps instantly, just as I was doing them, is this custom feature. Just like you would in the store, you specify that you have a state of a request status that could be idle, pending, fulfilled, or an error. And then it keys off of, it'll have a computed is pending, is fulfilled, error, and so on. And a similar thing happens with data service, and the feature that I'll go over, where it has built-in loading states and whatnot. And then there's also functions to then set those. And so when you're loading, you can say that it's pending, and you can say it's fulfilled or whatever. And then an instance of that in use here is that you inject here the request status, and then that automatically exposes this function set pending, and then you await that, and then once you have the result of the books, you can then say it's fulfilled. And that signature there is given by these that you can throw into there. And then another one, even more straightforward, is just log your state. Just console log your state as it changes. You just have a feature with hooks. You say the name that you want of it in this parameter here, and it just has an effect that will log your state. And it's just as easy as slapping in with logger of books.
Yeah, nice. Maybe that's a good point that we can quickly answer two questions. There is this one from Pretty Nesh. I can't find an example on how to use the SignalStore with entities. Michael, since you're already on the documentation, can you quickly open it? The entity management. So here we have it. This is the official documentation, and there are some examples there.
I'll make this a little bigger on this side.
Yeah. So everything's there. Right. So it's a bunch of, how would you say, functions?
Yeah. I'll scroll down to, you have the list of like updaters for adding one, adding multiple, setting one, updating multiple, updating all, removing one, removing all, and then remove all entities, and some various things with that. So by just having, again, with entities here, you can add them, remove them, and so on. And these are just exposed to anything downstream in the store.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. By the way, that's what we had in the global store, where it was called NGRX entity. In a way, that's now coming reimagined in the form of an extension. And because there's also a second part to that question, specifically with RX resource. Michael, do you have any experience with using RX resource and the SignalStore together?
Not that much. I did some exploratory stuff of resources in general, and I saw how, I believe in the blog post for NGRX 19, I believe I saw some examples of using some resources and stuff in there.
Yes.
In the new, I believe it was like the with props, which allows you to put non-signal stuff in there. So you'd put like a resource. And so I saw that and I was like, oh, this is really cool. But we've personally made the decision that we're not going to use like resources in our code base quite yet with how early it is. So I haven't had much of an opportunity other than kind of messing around to do both of them.
I see. Yeah. So in general, I would say, yeah, with props is meant for those kind of things which are not natively supported, and the resource is not something which is supported in Angular 19. There is something quite interesting, and this is something which I'm discussing quite often. If you're working on an application right now, and it's not live, it's not in production, would you be more ready to use experimental features already, like the resource? Because you would say, well, once this is finished, once we can go live, I don't know, it's autumn or maybe next year already, by the time it's going to be stable, hopefully. Or would you really wait?
Even though something that may be experimental, like in a greenfield project, like even though it wouldn't be, out in production, my thing with at least experimental stuff is if our like developer experience and like the syntax changes.
Yeah.
I know I've been following resources since like the initial like PR. And I know that between then and 19.2, even 0.1 to 0.2, and our recent upgrade just got us to 19.1. There has been some various changes, not too big, but substantial enough that I wouldn't have wanted us to be like, all right, resources, here they are. They do a lot of stuff, and there's for a primitive, there's a lot of bells and whistles, but the next time we update, we may need to change all of these things, and we may have to use this new thing, or there's this new thing that's coming out and it's so close, but we can't update. So with something like resources and being experimental, even if we were not getting this out to production, we made the call to not start with them yet. But on our radar, and as kind of new things happen, I drop the RFC, to our room and everything.
I see. So you're then careful about these things, and you say, well, I'll wait, although my application is also still in development.
And we're a lot more we're a lot more on top of the next stage after experimental with developer preview. When we started our project, we started at 17. And then when input signals were in release candidate going into, I think, 17.1, that was early enough that I had faith in them being, I believe at that point, dev preview, that I updated ours to use like a 17.1 release candidate. So with developer previews and like the extra stability, I had a lot extra faith in that, and really nothing to us changed on that. So
yeah, I see. Yeah, so for me, the developer preview is quite stable to me, and if we are honest to ourselves, the effect function is still in developer preview. So if you would be really strict, you couldn't even use signals at the moment. So yeah. In the end, it's always up to answer that. From Evgeny, API of RX resource is much more complicated than the API of Angular signals. Therefore, yes, there are much more yes, definitely. Also, I think what I, for example, have problems with is this kind of prefetching, the lazy loading mechanism of the resources, that they just all of a sudden except you're returning an undefined. There are different use cases, I think, which require different kind of behaviors. And RX resource one kind of wants to serve all of them. So there is a huge range of variation where maybe you have to kind of modify the API a little bit more. So fully agree on that. What's your opinion, Michael?
No, I agree. I mean, that's a good example of an instance between even 19.1 and 19.2 alone, is that there was not the streaming or the stream property initially on them, and that impacts some things. And then, like you said, with like initial values or intermediate values, we are actually going to pull in resources for one of our like internal dev utilities, where we fetch a lot of things just on demand, like not very reactively. Like almost everything is just like a button press rather than on like a page load. And so I made a little thing that sets the initial value. Before that was more like fleshed out with what I understand, some more like recent-ish kind of things.
Yeah,
so
yeah. I see. Yeah, and also I know kind of saying here, Deep Signal was already good, but the feature functions they sold him. Yeah, also to me. So to be honest, I was always a little bit skeptical when I saw the SignalStore, because I used to be, or I still, I highly value the Redux pattern in that sense. But once I saw what you can do with those features, I thought, okay, even if I need the Redux pattern, I'm going with the SignalStore. And in case I absolutely need it, I can always write my own Redux extension. So that's definitely, I always call them the crown jewels of the SignalStore.
Yeah. And the NGRX dev kit, I know a lot of people, have various thoughts on Redux. But a big thing that, even people skeptical is the dev tools are really nice. But you made a with dev tools feature in the dev kit where you don't even have to make your own Redux. You can be completely Redux free and still hook into the Redux dev tools using some, tricks behind the scene in that feature that you made. So that's really cool.
Yeah, thanks. It was necessary. It was really needed, also for myself, for my own applications.
Yeah, should we move on to the next thing?
I think. Yeah. Sachin is just saying he's still staying with Angular and NGRX. I understand it's NGRX Global Store then in your case. Yeah. Not everyone is convinced at the moment, but I hope, at least with the events extension, which we will hopefully get very soon, where we have then also official Redux support for the SignalStore, that also a huge amount of users will move over from the global store to the SignalStore.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so we just went over, our thoughts on some various things with resources, and I showed some doc examples of entity management and more simple features. But going back to this like CRUD one here, and the base example that, again, still isn't as extensible as I would like, but still great. I mean, it's still like a wonderful start, and again, incredible article and features, but just can't always fulfill the interface. So going back here, we have here we pass in the service and what types to expect from those parameters in the state. Moving on, we throw in the computed there, just computes the length of everything. The next sort of step is in the methods. The first thing you want to do is you just inject the service that you passed in there to reference, and then here, just sort of, here's the rest of the OWL. You have all these mostly RX methods, but also highlights in the article that it could be promises or whatever for like adding them. And here you have the standard kind of RX method thing where You have your signature here. You just expect like a string, like you're passing like an ID here. Your pipe, switch map into it. Your loading, which is like built into this feature, assumed in the interface. Say that it's true, and then because the interface expects an add item, you can just like do that here, and then you pipe it, and then you have, I like NGRX's tap response. That's technically like a little sub package of it, but that enforces a good structure on how you, at the end of like a stream of RxJS stuff, have a good side effect, especially for HTTP things where you can say what you want to do when you get the value, patch it, and then error, and then finalize after everything, whether it errored or valued. You set the loading to false. And then down the line, here is also a promise example. And then, you have your delete, your update, and among other things. And so there you have all the CRUD stuff, as well as some nice things like all items and item counts. And then article goes over how you do that. So you just have your SignalStore. Again, the to-do state at the very least has a to-do which requires an ID. And then you have your items here in the loading one. And so that is what's required to fulfill the with CRUD operations. You give the type of the entity, which in this case is, to-do is like a to-do app. And then you just pass it in the respective to-do service, which again, this fulfills an interface with all that CRUD stuff with the shape of the to-dos.
I see. So this article is more like this is how you create your own CRUD feature and not kind of using the one that Manfred created for the tab tools for the toolkit.
Yeah. This is similar in many ways.
Yeah.
But like step by step how you do it and like thought process of this. And again, it's like really good. And this one built in other things that you can have if you have like a notion of something is like done, you have your percentage or whatever. So, go wild from here what you want to do with your thing if you have like a to-do selector. So just another example of different features that you could make to extend your different types of entities, and just how you would throw that in the store right after that. And that would again be able to do things on all those items that were created from the main feature that was discussed in the article. And and then this is just showing some various examples of what consuming that stuff in the app would look like adding an item in like an add to do.
Nice.
So really, really great example. Thank you. I'm going to do it right this time.
Yes.
Fabian, right?
Fabian. Two times.
Okay. But yeah, thank you.
In case of doubt, you always say to the A in German, A. Very easy, yeah.
Okay.
The last name is a little bit more harder to pronounce, Grosebrink. He's a German living in Switzerland, by the way.
Nice. Well, I'm an American living in Minnesota, and my last name is an English word. So I have it pretty easy, but it's and this is a nice thing about working with doing collaborations, open source stuff is I meet a lot of people in different time zones whose last name isn't Small or Smith or something. So really great article overall about a really substantial feature that you can make step by step. And I wanted to highlight this because this was my starting point. Hey, Jason. Jason is...
Jason's also here. Hi.
Yeah, Jason Warner. Watch his streams. He does regular Angular streams throughout the week. was also, as I've came up with ideas, I've also bounced them off Jason. So great to have you here. So yeah. So with this article state and just like how good of an intro this was, I use this as my starting point for okay, how can I make things more granular and pick exactly what you want and omit the things that you don't want, especially, can't always have a delete, can't always have creating something. Maybe you have only read-onlys. So with this strong foundation, move on to putting my slides back on. So moving back to here, the slides were talking about the data service. Again, promises very similar here. Again, fulfilling the interface, how that's put in there, very similar to how you pass in the service and whatnot. Similar end results. You have all these selected things and loading things and methods. But again, what if my services for different types of entities are just Git? I'd say 90% of the time, like there may be one or two things maximum. My source for that is just trust me. That's what it feels like sometimes. And then we went over this article here. Can it be more custom? Can you pick and choose what you need at any given time? And this is what we got together to hash out. And so that is what the sort of the crown jewel of what we're going to be talking about here.
I think actually when you first contacted me about this, I was just thinking, well, just throw in error if it's not supported. But of course, that's not the best developer experience.
Yeah, that was I was thinking that is about what you have to do too. And I know when you're working on something like this, I know in me working on this, or if anyone here, by the way, the code is out there at that repo. Did you drop?
Yes, I dropped it already. Yep.
Okay. So yeah, link dropped in the feed. And again, the repo has everything, all the links that I mentioned, and it has 5 discrete steps of sort of going through this process.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what the end result looks like, is that you have with CRUD conditional, and then you pass in the service that fulfills a partial of the normal, like fuller interface that you would need for all the CRUD stuff. So in this case, I have a service that only does reading and deleting, really descriptive name I gave it. And then respectively, I don't want to create, so I set that to false. I want to read all, or I want to read one, set those to true. And then updating false, deleting true. And with that, from just having this signature here, and the way that this with CRUD conditional has been set up and parameterized, the respective methods that correspond to the reads and the delete will be exposed, and the create and the update will not be exposed. Just at build time, runtime, whatever, create won't be an option as you're writing stuff. So that is really slick. And so we'll be sort of going over this process.
Oh. So that means in your case, the update method in this case just does not exist. It's not that we are throwing an error. You can't just call it. So you have actually a compilation error, if you would. Yeah.
And just because she keeps jumping up here, in case you see her tail, say hi, Candy. She's my baby girl. She's a little shy, so I just have her in me here, or have her here in my room. Let's see. Okay, so this is the end signature. Let's go over how to do this. So, and I'll be going over this here in live code, but I thought I'd just take snapshots of everything to give you a preview of what to expect here. This is what that implementing service looks like, and you'll notice there is something glaring missing here. This is normal service. I mean, yeah, a read one, read all, delete URL, you inject the HTTP, but there's something ominous lurking. Boom, you got an interface. Okay, so you still need to have some part of the interface. In this case, I use the TypeScript. TypeScript has various helpers like pick, which in this case you say what the interface is. We have our CRUD interface that the feature expects with to-do types, and then you say I want the read all, the read one, and the delete, and then you don't have to implement anything else there. Another thing you could have done, if you wanted to be a little more loose with it, is you could have used partial instead of pick. And again, that's another built-in TypeScript utility where everything is considered optional. So that can be helpful, but pick a little stricter because you explicitly opt in to saying that the service will fulfill all that. So moving on. Here we got three things. So the top left, again, this is what the final signature looks like with that service. Top right, we have the service fulfilling that. And then finally here onto our the signature for our with CRUD conditional is that the to-do entity and the data services, in this case, because you can't pick and choose, it's just a partial. So everything, technically speaking, going into the CRUD conditional, it could be a partial, which is saying that anything is optional. But there are then checks inside of this that we'll go over that actually like verifies that the given config is expecting that or not.
Mm-hmm. So just for me to better understand it, the to-do read where you're using the pick, you need to use the pick there so that you can have a type-safe implementation of the CRUD service. You say, I don't want to implement anything except read all, read one, and delete. So you're very specific. And in your with CRUD conditional, you have to say, I don't know what comes along. I don't have any idea. I need to be prepared for anything. So that's why you say it's a partial. I just don't know. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and the CRUD conditional feature will inside actually have logic to narrow down what you have given it. And the contract there in this case is on the top left. Is you are responsible to say read all is true and create is false. That is the thing where you have the full control. You could accidentally toggle on create true, but not actually have picked that and implemented that in your service. So that way you configure it with whatnot is kind of the loosest part of this. But provided that you do that config right, that other thing here, the config extends the CRUD config that we'll go over. That corresponds to this, the 5 trues or falses.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that is also the other thing passed in. So here's this config.
Yeah.
Here's this thing. So about the config and how these things like map out here is that on the right you have the implementation with the CRUD conditional. And so when you say false, this config here, if you have create and it is true, then a method is expected to be returned that has a create that takes it like an entity, and it's just void because you do all the patching in a side effect. Or if it is false, create extends false of the config, you just return an empty object. And then the way that shakes out with like methods and a signature is, you don't see a bunch of empty objects if you don't opt into anything. That's just sort of abstracted out. Similar thing with, I do say we want read one to be true from the config. And so then that exposes a read one, which expects an ID of a number. I could have been more precise and I could have said, the base entity, which again, that expects it at least has an ID of number, but that's how that corresponds to there, or nothing. Read all, so that'll expose read all. Update, empty object, delete, true, exposes, delete, takes an entity, turns void.
So we are applying here conditional types, so to say. And I think the nice thing here is that we are open here for anything, but at the time when we are providing the real type to TypeScript, then it says, okay, what is going to be? What are the values now for the configurations? In a way, it derives its own type where it says if it's true or false. And then depending on those kind of values or on those kind of types, actually, it is creating a new customized type, which has exactly those features you want to have enabled. And the nice thing is, if you're returning an empty object and you're combining multiple empty objects together, or empty classes and empty types in this case, you end up with an empty one. So we can have 5 ones as well or 6 ones. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah, and you could, if you wanted to roll the worst CRUD conditional, set everything to false, and then you wouldn't have access to basically anything except the default state it expects, having items and loading. But what's the use for that? So
in the end, we are already defining here the resulting type, right? So this is already what we are getting as an end user from the SignalStore. This type, from a types perspective at least, is doing already the hard work.
Yeah, exactly. And then we'll go into like the guts of how in the future that is determined, like beyond
implementation
config. Going over the implementation. So this is my example I've been doing is reading, read one, read all, and deleting. So this is like an overview of that where, we first actually we minimize this and switch over to the real code to show what this doesn't look like if you just have like the boilerplate version, which is again, so sorry, stepping back to see what these look like when they're not all minified is effectively, thank you for biting my hand, Candy. I love that. Thank you. You have your standard pipe, switch mapping, passing the state, creating, and then your next error, finalize, and so on. And so again, with all this stuff to write here, I'm going to return to the screen, the slideshow. That is in all of this stuff that is, that I have collapsed here.
Yep.
And so just like that article we started off of, you inject the service. And then importantly here, thank you, Candy. You have, and this is kind of like the truth of the implementation, is you have this methods const, which is a record, which if you're not familiar with like TypeScript records, it's just like this is a way of mapping like a string to whatever type of thing you want. In this case, we'll be mapping them to like functions. And so because if to go back this slide here, like this is going to be mapping the read one to like a function, like or not. So this is that corresponds to this methods here is like what if the config provides delete, you have your RX method that I've collapsed here. Delete is a reserved word in TypeScript, so I had to give it a little name. But then you add to the record the delete key, and that has the input of a value. And then if you look at this, you're like, it's not going to expose like delete with a 3 in it, right? Like, what am I, like a hacker from 2003? We'll sort that out with a little bit more TypeScript. And then if the config exposes the read all, you implement that. You put that in the record. Read one, same thing. And then here at the end, if you were to console log the methods record, this is basically what you would see in JavaScript, is that you have this record is an object with a key of delete, and then it exposes this function, which again still has the weird name. You have read all, and then read one, and all the types are stripped away. But to you, you'll see the types. But this is just how it is in pure JavaScript in the end. And the key here is that we do, because our signature in the end that we are exposing, we have like faith in it, and it effectively is this mapping. Then we can play with the names a little bit by casting this record as the CRUD methods of whatever your config and entity is. So even though in practice, our config that we passed in technically produces a record with delete with a 3 in there, we go back here, we are casting to this CRUD config with a delete that exposes delete here. And so when you are using this feature and developing with that, you will see this exposed here as like delete normally. Mm-hmm. And casting allows us to do that, but under the hood, technically in raw JavaScript, you have this here. But so yeah, you with the config, narrow it all down. You put in the respective records if they're provided, and then you return that and cast it in like sort of the cleaner version that you want.
Mm-hmm. So in a way, it looks like a little bit like redundancy, but I think that's the usual way how it works. You have the typing part and you have the implementation where we again see these conditions. And then you, in a way, you could say at the end, we are doing a leap of faith. Is this the way how you say it? That we say, okay, all eyes closed. We just say this is now what we are expecting. And then TypeScript, of course, also accepts it.
Yeah. But with our config, the way we've nailed it down, like we can have faith in this, that the config actually passed it in.
Yeah. Michael, this entity ID that you have there, why do you use that? In the methods read one?
Good question. So I guess I was not the most consistent across here. If we go back to the previous slide, the read one, I kind of hinted at this earlier. It has this ID of number. This is technically a bit more precise. Mm-hmm. That our generic entity, which extends this base one, will always have an ID. And so I can show in the actual demo of this that this, instead of just saying it could be a string, like let's say you change it to a number, mm-hmm. then that signature up here, or it is a number. If say you change it to like a string, like you change it to use like OIDs with all this other characters that you can have in there, then technically this wouldn't hold up as well. But in here, this actual entity expects whatever the actual ID of that sort of base entity will be. So
okay.
This is a little more precise.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But in the end, you could then also say the ID doesn't have to be a number. It could also be a string, and then you're also still on the type safe part or path. Yeah. Yes. Okay.
Okay. Let's see. Okay. Chat seems where it was before. Oh, and then here I have an example of, one in depth. So the stuff we went over, switch map, patching stuff. Oh, but importantly though, because the signature of this, the service is like a partial, because who knows what they're actually going to do with the implementation. The create, technically with this being optional, can't actually be like guaranteed from like a type perspective with a partial without some sort of strategy of narrowing. But we check the config for create. The type system still, though, without us doing some other narrowing, doesn't quite know that. So we can use the non-null assertion exclamation point to say no, just trust me with this implementation here. Our config trusts that. We trust ourselves. We will say that's there. Otherwise, it's going to be you can't pass in a value if it may not be there. And this was a choice. There was other ways that I could have done this, but I was confident enough with the way that the create is passed in, and I was like, all right, well, just trust me. That's a little nuance there.
Yeah, but so just for me again to understand it a little bit better, what could happen is that someone provides a configuration which does not meet the service implementation. That I would say I am going to disable the creation feature, or I'm going to enabling the creation feature, and my service, because you're using the pick and you have to, you could theoretically say, well, but I don't implement it, and then we would have here a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that is. Sorry, go ahead.
No.
Oh, and that is, like I mentioned before, that is like the kind of the one point where you have to be on top of whether you've told the config something is true or false. You are holding your service to the pick standard, but you then have to like mirror that. If you picked, a create, that you say create true.
Yep.
So yeah, that is an important aspect of this, where
I see
the little fuzzy boundaries.
So theoretically, you could also come up here with a condition where you then really check if the create is there, and if it's not there, you just throw maybe an error where you say, look, you said you want to have a create, now you provided me with a service which doesn't have the create. This would also be possible, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I see. Another celebrity is here. Hello, Mark.
Oh, Mark, great to have you here, and thanks for the shout out. I think it was on Blue Sky earlier, so it's great to have you here. Normally it's me in the chat of a live stream saying hi to you. So this is what an honor.
What an honor, yeah. I mean, I guess this issue that we have here with create, we could in a way also fix it in the typing system, but this is, I think, one of the main trade-offs when it comes to kind of going into the advanced type system, that you sometimes probably reach a point where you say, okay, who's going to understand what I'm writing here? Because not all of us are using the type system all the time. Most of us are writing applications. So you have to say, okay, is it really worth it? Or do I just throw an error or something else?
Yeah, exactly. Could have done something like a type predicate or some other things like that. If you look up TypeScript type predicate, and you also have a function which a little interesting the way they work. I won't go into depth in this because it's not how I did it, but even type predicates have casting in them where you have to say, trust me, bro. Yeah. But that's an interesting thing to look up if that sounds curious. But yeah, like you said, that would, something like that or different strategy may have been a little bit safer. But
absolutely. Just by the way, I had a discussion once with Mathieu Riegler, also from the Angular team, about some things in the HTTP client. And I said, why don't you do this via the type system? Why do you throw a runtime error in that case? You could come up with a compilation error. And he told me exactly that. He said, you can do a lot of things with types, but who's going to read it? Who is going to be able to maintain that code? I want to be able that a lot of developers are able to maintain it. So that's why we maybe want to go a little bit away from the advanced typing stuff.
Mm-hmm. And a little thing that I'll mention at the end, after we've transformed the sort of the base state with no conditions to, this end state here, is I do have a little bonus thing where I got a little looser with types. And one of my coworkers, I was excited about showing them this experimental thing. I got a little too loose and kind of lost track of the plot. And I had this like fancy thing, and I realized like when I was actually implementing the stuff, the signature was of what you passed into the functions was just basically any. And so I lost the plot there, but so there's a balance to strike here, like you said. What is maintainable? What is not?
So I think it's also the same within RxJS. If you have hundreds, I mean, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but if you have hundreds of lines where you have just one pipe, sometimes it might be better if you make a break and say, look, let's just stop here and then continue, not have everything. I can't read it. So
yeah, you type one thing wrong and your whole pipe that's 20 lines is just red. Yeah. Which is my other favorite little thing with the SignalStore, I will say. is it happens. You do one thing a little wrong, and it's like suddenly your ID is all red, and you're like, but
Yeah.
yeah. So and as Jason is saying in the chat, doing typing with the SignalStore is a little bit something to crack here, and this is just the way that I went about this with this custom feature here. And like I said, with that experimental thing, I could also loosen things up like I did in that case, but we'll get to that later. Passing a store to a method can be difficult. Believe it or not, Jason, if I'm thinking of the thing I was talking about correctly, I believe that's kind of what I do in that sort of that last step there. So when we get to that, I'll mention that again. So this is the full thing. This has the create, delete, read all, whatnot. Again, at the end, you just have create and delete expose. Okay. And there is the end of my slides, which means on to the interesting part in depth here. So I have
becomes serious.
Could you drop the link one more time? Because it's
Yes, of course. Yeah.
Okay. So while you're dropping the link, I'll give a preview of what we're going to talk about here. So again, in this repository that I've made here in the README, it has an open and Stackblitz thing, which is really cool. If you look up open and Stackblitz and go to their docs, you can have like a repo. Just you put a thing in your README and you hook up the the URL right, and you can mess with this as a Stackblitz directly from the repo. Repo state, it'll open it up in a new window. Link to the stream, description, blah, blah, blah. Serving it with ngserve, but the open button will do that. And then the links to articles. And I even made tests. If I remember to run them on the one of the last steps here. So preview that there. Thanks for dropping the link there. So I have 5 discrete steps. There's sort of the store part of the store with no feature that has everything, and we basically went over this. So in total, this is a lot of lines. Scroll to the bottom, including the component that implements it. Let's see. Before that, we have about 174 lines with everything done manually. So, and I'll pull up, open. And then here, I've also provided all these links. And then each one of these sections that we talk about, like section 1, you can see it in action here. And this is just using the JSON server like API that you'll see pointed at there that learned about from the Angular docs. Actually, if you run like the local version of the create a basic Angular app. Didn't think about the UX too much of this, but I wanted to show off that the loading state is built into these features. So I have a completed to do here. I'll say flip this, and that runs the update function, and it's false. So once it's done, if I want to delete it, now that's deleted. If you want to add one, or you want to get by a particular ID, like 1, then you have this here. So this basic one has implemented everything without a feature, just all the CRUD stuff you could want. So that is example 1, if you want to look at that. Going on to the simple CRUD feature 2. Again, it's going to look similar, but different implementation. This is the one based off of that wonderful article. I'll open this up here. And just as a review to look at our, importantly, there is a shared thing where I talked about the ID is a number. The entities have to at least include that. All of these have the base state of them. The feature will expect that you make room for a selected item of that type or null, the items, which is an array, and then a loading state. And then here is the CRUD service that you can do partials or picks from.
What I just wanted to add, probably in the future, the loading property probably might become a resource status type.
Exactly.
Yeah, because now since we know what the Angular team is expecting in terms of API when it comes to loading things, that won't make sense.
Yeah, I see. Evgeny said, is ID kind of required field? Can it be UUID? Yeah. If you want to tweak the signature of your store to be a UUID, then you could do that. And then respectively, anything that uses the feature that expects this base entity here would expect the UUID. So yeah. And then the read one, would expect some UUID, for example. And again, this is, you could do a partial or more precisely a pick. And then, sort of the implementation of the feature, it has your non-null assertions, but it's up to you to pick the right thing and then give the right signature. And then as far as like the actual like application state, just beyond the feature here, you want to extend the base state, which is up here of the to-do, that it has selected item, loading state. And then the to-do will have the ID, like the base entity, and then particular to your to-do types or whatever type that you're doing, like a book or something like that. You'd have a title for to-dos you have completed, and then your user ID for the to-do. So these are the shared models that I'll go over. I have them in one tab, but that's under the shared folder here between all these steps. So let's go to, and again, base feature takes a service, all these types, blah, blah, blah. That stuff's been abstracted into here. And just as an overview, you have the service, create implementations, all this stuff here. And this is the state which we will start. So now Reiner and I will go into step 3, which starts cleanly like from that state. How did we do the live Visual Studio Code sharing session again?
Good question. I don't know.
Yeah. We did this on a call a couple weeks ago before we had to reschedule. So
yes. The question is if we need to do it or if you just give it a try on your own.
Okay.
Are you brave?
Yeah, I'll give it a try on my own. Let's see. I'm going to open up my cheat sheet of the finalized stuff on different tab here, but I did give myself instructions. So again, if you want to program along, don't mind the typo. I gave myself instructions starting in 03 stream work in progress conditional feature. Starts at the state of the article with no customization in it. So the first thing is you want a generic for our config. So I'm just going to, for the sake of brevity, just going to paste that on here. So this is, you'll recognize this from the signature of the feature. And so create, read one, read all, delete, update as Booleans. Okay, so that is step 1. Define the how the config is read with the methods. Hey, Candy, can you get down? Thank you.
That is now this conditional type, right? Where we are saying we are. Yeah, the big one.
The big one, where again to review, this config extends this CRUD config. The create, if it is true, it will expose this create function or not. And again, that's in the end, that's just sort of the empty objects are just, they just shake out, won't show up. Read one, supposed to read one of this. And again, like I pointed out before, if you wanted, you could do the entity of ID. Yeah, so that's enhancing that as we go here. The rest of these look legit. Yep, and so yeah, these all expect either the ID or the entity here. And the matter of if you do the create as true or false in the actual implementation, this is what it corresponds to here. This chain of things. Okay, so that is step 2.
So in the end, we are saying we don't know, and then when it's used, the function with a very specific type, this kind of a special config with the conditional type steps in and saying, now I'm giving you the very specific type for the config that you have provided. That's what we're doing here. Yeah.
And this is what initially when I was like, oh, this the with data service, I was like, oh, it's just a little too strict for me. This is where I took that base article, I whipped up a stack blitz, and I was writing like, can you help me? Like, you're smart. How does that work? I'm pretty sure you can conditionally return things or not, depending on what you do. But so this is again a huge thank you for especially this. Seeing this now may look like a lot to you, still is a bit, but yeah, just the core ID. If you just link this to here, that what you've said is true or not, what this returns in the end, that is essentially the core of this configuration here.
Yeah. Maybe also something else, you could theoretically also do it in a different way, because it looks very verbose here that you have for every specific property, you have an explicit check. But again, in the end, it comes down, do you want to create another abstraction where you then have a loop over a map that defines what crate actually returns? Or do you want to keep it simple, kind of sacrifice it, a little bit more code, but at least you can read it better? This is where we actually decided to go with the second approach, where I say, okay, it's just a few lines more, but the chance that more people can read it is quite higher. So that's why we went with this one.
Yeah, exactly. And I will say from me looking at the toolkit, most of my work on the toolkit has just been doc stuff, but looking at the source code, especially when I was looking at what do I want from the with data service from the toolkit, is that, yeah, library code is, and especially the typing, is a whole other layer of considerations that you may have never considered with types, and this trade-off of what is more like proper versus what is maintainable. And especially getting fancy because, a few people in a library do it more proper once. So you have, a tighter experience as an application user. And sort of this is the sort of balance that I decided to strike here.
Absolutely.
Return type from the config. And now, okay, here is the implementation. So with CRUD operations, it just had one generic here, but we are going to throw in, we need two things, because now not only do we have the typing for the entity for the service, but we're also going to need the config to be passed in. So that is step 1. Step 2, we're still passing in the data service, but instead of the full service, we can't expect everything. So I'm going to very carefully paste in the right thing. Put in a partial, and now you'll see this error here, but I think that's just... we'll get to that. Yeah, so here, still passing as service, but at this point here, we've loosened this up because we can pick and choose. And then let's go down to here, the same signature here. That's great.
Maybe a few words about this config. So you might want to ask yourself, or viewers might ask themselves, why do you say config? Config, why do you come up with a separate type? Why don't you just say in line 49, config is the CRUD config? Because it's not just a CRUD config where the different properties can be a Boolean. By making it generic, we are saying it is a very special config with the concrete values of the Booleans. And this is why we actually can apply then this conditional types, where you can really look at the actual Boolean values and not just say it's a Boolean. No, it's not a Boolean. It's either false or it's either true. And this is what we achieve by using here generic types.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not just true or false of like any key, but it's true or false of create, of read, update, delete. So yeah, that and that it has definitely been a great exercise in generics. Yeah, particular here, preview that there. So it's not just a generic whatever config, could be anything. It is these particular key value pairings of this.
Yeah, I mean, in this case, this is what CRUD config would be. If we would say config is a CRUD config, then TypeScript would say the type of create is a Boolean. But since now we are using actually a generic and we say there is something very specific, a very specific CRUD config, which will be passed on, then TypeScript will be able to infer the actual values and will then say, okay, it's not Boolean, the create is either a false or a true. It's one very specific value here. And this is the key thing about it.
And similar case for the
Mark is asking something. Dive a little bit deeper. The runner has two values. What could go wrong by not doing it in the way you're specifying? The problem is with our conditional type that we have. If we just tell TypeScript, look, it can be a Boolean, then TypeScript does not know, well, does it now extend true or now does it extend false? But we need to know if it's true or false, because based on that information, the outcome of the type will change. So we are not satisfied with just having a Boolean. We need to say, no, I need to know the explicit value itself. This is why this is so important. Because we're using here, because the outcoming type depends if it's false or true. This is the reason.
Yeah, and it's that kind of thinking that's especially when you get to, kind of library tier stuff where you're like, oh, okay, especially with this conditionality, like you said. Okay, so point out my cheat sheet again. Okay.
Maybe let me quickly check. We can do one thing, Michael, just to demonstrate it a little bit better, if we have time. Can you go to the top? We are just now improvising. Not sure if that actually works fine. After the type CRUD methods, after you have defined them, in line number 39, you're saying declare function. Just write it. Declare function. Some name it isn't so important what name it is. Whatever. And then you say config, and you say the type of the config now is a CRUD config without the generics.
Oh. Yeah.
Right. The CRUD config. Right. Yep. And then you're returning just the config as it is. Yeah. Or you don't have to return anything. You just say that the function is returning the CRUD config.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you don't need to implement it because we are declaring it here. Right. Yeah. And then you call function whatever. And you provide some config, some values. It's not so important which ones. You would have to type all of them.
Oh,
unfortunately.
Yeah, this is the constraint of that. That's nice with this. Still expects all of them. Read one.
Yeah, I think one argument is missing.
There we go.
Good. You are storing the value of whatever to a variable. You can call it const a or something. Yep. And maybe in whatever you say, can you go to the line 39? You are saying you're returning the CRUD methods of CRUD config and then some kind of to-do entity. You just provide the type.
Yeah.
At the end, the return type is the CRUD methods.
Oh.
And then you say CRUD config and some to do. It's not so important. Also some entity, what we have. I think there is a comma necessary.
A comma.
It's not the string. It's just a comma, and then you say to do. No. It's just it's two types, two different types.
Oh, yeah.
And you don't. Yes, you don't need these sharp brackets. You can remove them. Yep. And now just to do. That should do it. To do, cannot find. Yeah. And now in line 41, you create a new line and you just say val, and then you press the dot that we see what this actually contains. And in this case, we don't see so much because now it says, that the types obviously are not that clear because the CRUD config is just a CRUD config. No one really knows what it is. But if you would now say in whatever, you are providing now the generic type, and you say it's config extends CRUD config in line number 39. Before after the whatever.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. You open it, and then you say config extends CRUD config. And then you say config in yes, exactly.
Yeah. Make it the
config, just config.
Oh, config.
Yep. Config. And also CRUD methods, you also have to type in config line at the end. Right. And if you now again go to the val, then it should actually say the create does exist this time, because now it knows that we have provided create is true, because now TypeScript can understand the value. It doesn't just see it as a Boolean anymore, which it was before. That's the trick.
Nice. Let's see.
Yeah. Sorry for putting you into this, Michael.
No, it's all good. 1 hour and 27-ish minutes into the stream. I'm just going to comment these out, but I'll save this. I'll save this stuff here because this is a good lesson in this. Okay. Okay. So yeah, good lesson in the difference between those two things. So the next thing we're going to do is inject the service just like that, but also have our methods record, and then you can't just return everything here. So in the case of our create, we have to check that the config has create. So I'm just going to bury this implementation of the non-conditional for the moment. And you have here that the config does have to create Boolean. And then if so, we can make an intermediate const with the whole implementation of the RX method, all that stuff there. Our non-null assertion that we talked about before, that at least our implementation, we say, okay, it's going to be there. It's not just a partial. It's going to be there because we are our config says so. We know that. We go through here, and then in the methods record, we will introduce the create key that exposes this create that takes an entity. And yeah, and then so the rest of this, the same process follows suit. So I'm going to just pull this out here.
It's always the same now. It's kind of really like now we just need to implement it in that way. Exactly.
Okay, and then blah, blah, blah. On my off screen, I am going to pull this in. We got the if delete, or no, if our create is there. Okay, put this in here. And then, so yeah, the rest of the owl, and then if there is that thing, map that there. And then again, here at the end, this is what, in pure JavaScript, this mapping will be, especially with the delete, which because it was a reserved keyword, I had to define that like this here. But our casting at the end will, and that's cut off from here, but you would see the delete like properly typed and with the proper name here returned in the end.
Yeah, exactly. This is now, again, this is what TypeScript would say, look, as long as you cannot give me a concrete type for your config, this is what I have. I don't know what it should be, but once we use it, we provide a real type, and then TypeScript says, okay, and now I know what's going to happen.
And then let's pull up the, oh boy, what do we got here? We got line 50.
Oh, I think the, sorry, did you know the my declare function is actually commented, so it shouldn't throw.
Yeah, what is on line 57? I gotta get rid of some of these. That is the other page. That is another page.
57. If you.
Oh, I think that was old. That was just stale.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think the problem was when this declare function, we didn't really implement it.
Yeah.
And of course, the reloading happened, which means it was executed, and then we got an error.
Yeah, and then let's save this here. And
then is asking if it's possible. I mean, probably not that we implement it now, but just in theory, to add callbacks on success, on error for those kind of methods.
Oh yeah, yeah. You could totally extend that to do that, I believe. Well, I imagine so.
So we can just put it into the service, which we are actually calling the to-do service, and that could then do the thing. Or you can also say in the configuration, you are providing the on success callbacks on your own, and then the service or the SignalStore in this case would call them. That's not the problem.
Yeah,
but we're not going to do it now. So.
Let's see. Oh, okay. So the interesting. When did I change that? Oh, these are all having fun. I don't know what the issue is, but this was all right. I swear this was all right.
I believe you.
I'm going to jump to the after state because it effectively is all like that there. So this, for the sake of figuring out this exact little thing here, if you go to step 04, final conditional feature in the routing, and I'm just going to stash this. I'll go back and I'll remember to put in that one little note for ours. I'm just going to stash this so everything works nice. And if you go to step 4, this is what the feature would look like without the errors. And I'm going to, what I was trying to do and show off in step 3 is I did provide this methods here. And you go to step 4 and you will see the respective logging of the 3 different states I have here. So in 4, I created 3 components. One has, and the respective pieces, one has everything, and the reads has both the read one and read all. I wrote this in a way so you could pick or choose one of them, but for the sake of conversation, I just let this stand in for both. So on this page here, you have a component that has a store where the service did all the CRUD things here, and that is what you are seeing logged here. See the 3 and the delete. And on the consumer side, again, to emphasize, in the to-dos all CRUD component, oh, here is, it's implementing the whole everything, the whole CRUD service. And then you have your initial state with your selected items, loading, passing everything here. Everything's all true. You're pointing at that service. And then all of these methods, including the, where is the remove to do? Okay, so I I specified under the function remove to do, you have this delete here, expecting it spelled not like that, because we are conditional type. We casted it as such, even though you will see here at runtime, you have your delete with the 3. And then I have a create and delete component that is also embedded there, and a read one. And so you see these 2 read things. And interestingly enough, let's actually jump into this read only one. Keep everything as it is. Now, if I was to try to, let's say, delete to do this dot to do store dot, what is exposed? We have the all items. We have our loading state, and we only have read all or read one or selected items. If we try to do delete, try to throw that in there, it's like this does not exist. But here in our to-dos read only one, let's go up here and tweak this. And this will show off a bit of the, you gotta be correct about this in runtime here. We'll say this is true, and now the errors go away. We haven't actually put this in here, so but this is up to your discretion that the config is correct. We no longer have this error here. It thinks that can be possible because you told the config, but if I try to, I'm gonna throw that in there really quickly. What is that? Delete to do. And then I'm gonna throw that into here. Okay, so throwing that into the here's our read-only one. We put in like the wrong thing in the config. We try to do this here, and then service.delete at like runtime is not actually a function here. And the feature at line 98, as so here, 98. Yeah, well, it's more precisely 84, but yeah. So this non-null assertion here, if the config is right, you won't actually be hitting this and getting this runtime, but our config is not actually true to the service. And we get this runtime error here. So that is the importance of, at runtime, having the right config provided. So I'll stash these again. And so the same case pans out for all of these, is that this one has everything. The read and delete onlys. I have my pick here that has the read all and delete one. Specify the correct things here, and then all of the respective things and nothing more than this are exposed here.
Mm-hmm. So we have now a working and running version.
And I'll even show you an overview of the test without actually getting the runner going. So just have a CRUD service here, and the respective tests will just do like picks or partials from here. The CRUD conditional, if you have everything here, so I didn't pick anything, you actually set everything to true. I put in the store here. You got to have a fake async, so the service can fake the these observables on the inside. Mm-hmm. And then in the injection context, I instantiate the store, and then I'm not really that great at tests. I know I did a PR for the toolkit once, and you're like, you got too many ticks, but that's how I did it. So there's nothing in here, and then if you read them, there was one item in the store, and so that's there, and everything just works. And so this is, just a lot of expects there to be this thing, and it just works to how I had that thing go. Create true. but that is the only thing here. Expecting the create to be a function, but importantly here, you can actually expect something to throw, but TypeScript will get mad at you if you don't have this annotation. And so it's like, this doesn't exist on there, but we want the test to not have syntactical errors. So we say, TypeScript, we know this is an error, evaluate it, don't complain at build time to us, and just, we are going to expect this to throw. And the same thing across the board. If you only have read one and read all, you expect those are functions that do their things, and that you expect that these would all actually throw.
Nice.
So yeah, and that is, again, that is the state of this one. And then lastly, this is I got to restart my server here. Yep. The last thing I'll go over, I can't speak too much about this because this is a work in progress, but I think this is interesting. Weirdly enough, this is almost in the other direction, where not everything is done out of the box for you, opt in or out. But I found that even in our own different like CRUD services of ours, not everything has the same exact signature for them either. We've had times where we pass in an ID that is a number. We have other times that we've passed in like a UUID. I think depending on like the service, depending on the back end thing. And so that was kind of a point where I was like, do I like expand the base entity to expect both of them or either of them? And then sometimes, like normally when you think of in some simpler examples like get all, you just have an endpoint where you expect all those entities live and you just call that. Sometimes you have too many things. Like we have too many of a certain type of like entity for like different configurations of users' apps. We have a lot of users. Each user can have many instances of that app. So we don't want to query everything. So you have to put in a filter for what you're going to query. And so, and that is constructed like how many records, what subsection of this. And so, to the point where, yes, you could opt in or out of like you do or don't have a delete, you do or don't have a create. I needed to expand the signatures more, and I will show you a preview of this. I believe this is possible, but I probably have to do a little bit more TypeScript work, maybe get a little fancier with generics, but I'll show off kind of the intermediate state of this as this is now. So this is a work in progress. The mapper here is going to look pretty similar. You still have your base state, base entity here, your CRUD config, and it's pretty similar here, but one difference you'll see is that rather than like not taking anything, I have this optional search parameter. Like I said, sometimes we have so many things on for a certain entity, you want to be able to pass in a thing, or you could not. So passing along any sort of like search thing depends on the entity. So I say any here, or not. That is optional here. And then at one point in my messing around, I kind of went mad and tricked myself. And I was like, oh, let's just make everything optional, any or whatever. And that is bad because, you know, anything can be like different. And I had these working examples in my feature working so well where they had different shapes, but there was no type safety. So I'll explain kind of what I'm going to do next after, you know, this talk and stuff like that in my own work. But I broke out the different types of things into little individual steps, be more granular. If this is like the method read, same kind of thing before, but I just went more verbose with this. Then you can expect to have this where search is optional or whatever. And then again, it's very similar, but I also loosened this up because sometimes if you create or update something, for example, it may require an ID in general on that entity, but sometimes, most of the times, the IDs are UUIDs that the backend creates. So I loosened this up and I was like, okay, the create one will take a partial of the entity. And so that's me getting a little different here. And then the respective methods that are passed in, you are expected to pass in the method like wholesale with its parameter, and then everything else looks the same. And let me show you what this looks like in practice, but still not quite like what I like it, is that you pass in whatever the name of the thing is, as long as it returns an observable of a to-do. That's what I've had the config to expect. Then you can pass this in, and I could have put anything here. And then here, this service has all the differently named things, but they're still pretty similar. Update may only be a partial sometimes. And then this is essentially it. And then still the end consumer, just like the more finalized thing, has a similar scenario where you can create, delete things with effectively the same sort of typings, but at the CRUD mapping point, you have then passed in the respective method. The next thing from here, maybe some people have some ideas or something, but I think my next step to, like, this can be a lie. This can, like, the way I have this here now, this can be a lie. There's nothing stopping this actually from being that. It's just that this, because this is throwing an error, this is throwing an error, this actual service requires an ID of a number here. But like, there's nothing here strictly saying that this, like, this is to be able to map a create to a method. So my next step that I am thinking of is maybe, as verbose as it is, I'm pretty sure this would just work, but it's gross, is that you could say just like, I want read all's param to be this. And then I'll actually like require this to truly conform to that. And then so you just be specific. And like, as gross as that is,
can I quickly see the implementation? Maybe it's already working what you want to do. Can you go to the with CRUD mappings? What's the signature of the read all? You have the with CRUD mappings, this function.
So yeah, the actual the search is vague enough that it could be there or not. But
but I'm thinking about the value of number where you said you could be lying. I'm not sure if this is actually the case, because you're providing already the to-do. So TypeScript would be able to understand that the entity is a to-do and would say it has to be of the type of the ID of the entity. So if you would say value is string, it might be the case that you already get an error and you don't need to do anything. It's already working.
Yeah, so I was thinking of a different thing when I alluded to before that at some point I loosen these all up to any's. Okay. Because I didn't want to account for, because sometimes when you create, you're not even doing like a partial. Sometimes you say the partial entity that you want, but then you also have to, like, sometimes we pass in another field. Sometimes in a update or delete, we need like a broader thing. So I'm like, do I then have a spread of things, pass that in here? And so I think what I meant with like the actual implementation, I was able to do stuff. That is when I loosened everything up to be any. But again, at that point, like, what's the use of all this stuff here? What's the use of like typing when you make literally anything any? So my idea of allowing this to be loose enough is basically just adding another layer of generics where you could say like the read all's input is a search thing or not, or is, in this case, the read one, we specified that the entity of ID, which is a number, is there. So yes, this is correct. But if I wanted the read one to say also passes in a search and the number for the ID, then I could probably like genericize this. And as more verbose as that would be, this is still a lot saves me so many more lines than the actual individual RX methods and stuff like that, and still would give the loading state and stuff like that. So yeah, that was, you're right that for now the signature is like this, but when I needed more flexibility, and I'm not quite sure how to do that yet without adding a ton more generics, it was possible to like lie to this because these were all like any. So, and then here, like there was no use in the, like at least here you can expect this. I had things where there was like multiple parameters and like no errors were thrown because of like any, but you know, like this wasn't actually inferring anything or telling me that like, in this case, a create for our, you know, our app instances of, you know, different users is, you know, setups takes this thing or not to create them and so on. So the next step in this process is finding the middle ground of like, what can I do to like properly allow these to be open in the feature so that these here can be this, and yet still save all the space that, you know, an RX method takes. It still handles the loading and all that stuff, and it would have a uniform output of you know, the same name for functions and stuff like that. So I think getting more granular like this still is a value savings to be able to map these specifically and expand each one of these signatures. And probably maybe there's a better way, but I think I could probably just brute force it by having it take a generic for each one of these, and maybe a default if you want to omit one. If it's like, you know, out of the box, it's just a partial.
Yeah, I think generally speaking, if you have generics, you could kind of use TypeScript's inference with the types. But if it's very complicated, and if you're doing, if you start developing your thing, then I always also define the type explicitly. So I would then say with CRUD mappings, sharp brackets, and I would say this is the type. Bam, there you have it. And then once I'm feeling more comfortable with it, then I try to remove it and let TypeScript do the heavy lifting.
Yeah, that is the next step for after the stream. So I'll try something like that. And and this is, while I'm at this is my this is my last thing, but something Jason alluded to before of ease of passing things into a store. The NGRX toolkit has a helper function that I like that is with Feature Factory. And I'll jump into this. There isn't a doc page for this, but it allows you to pass in properties, methods, or signals from a store to a feature. And you can do this in various aspects with like features already. But it has like, you need to know these like type helpers and stuff like that. And sometimes you can't know like everything ahead of the time. And so you have to get like fancy with some stuff. And so what I like about with Feature Factory, most importantly, is that it exposes this everything in the store upstream from this right here. So I can pass in the service, which is in this prop here, conveniently to all of these without needing to specify in the CRUD mapping that you have a to, you know, this and that. Like, yes, you do have that with like the CRUD mapping stuff, but I don't have to be like so particular. This could be various services that all pick a piece of this and that thing of like a CRUD thing if you had multiples. So what I like about the Feature Factory thing in the toolkit, which is this helper, is that it just makes it very easily to access the store and pass in respective services. If you need a bit more granularity and you have an entity spread over multiple CRUD services.
Exactly. For example, entities is such a thing. You could say the property entity is already there, but it's not this kind of type that my SignalStore feature requires. But then the name is already blocked. There is no way how I can do it, except you have this with Feature Factory, and then you can say, yeah, I know your entities is the entities you require is a dictionary, but I have a list in my store, but I can always map them, and then you give you the entities exactly as you want them. It's kind of I would say, a more advanced feature of the toolkit, more suited for library authors.
Yeah, and at this point, I don't have. I would say this is probably on par with a kind of like something you could see in a library. I'm not saying that I'm proposing this for any library or even the toolkit, but definitely this kind of typing granularity for me. This I could probably maybe bake in the feature factory. Maybe I'm thinking at the feature level if I wanted, but this is useful here at the application level for just my convenience sake.
Yeah. Well, it also means in a way it's more flexible. It provides more flexibility than the input constraints, and JSON means we are actually all library authors, even if we don't know it. Yeah, kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great.
Oh, see, we have some other things that have popped up.
There were some things in the beginning which I wanted to bring up at the end. But Michael, if you want to show something else, please.
Oh, well, I'm just going in the back, so I don't know your agenda of going front to back with questions, but I do say Ole, who shows up often to JSON streams as well. So, hi, Ole. What is your opinion about with Feature Factory versus the type as input? I feel like with Feature Factory is more explicit and flexible. Yeah, that's sort of my that is my exactly what I said before I even saw that. I think is that I find it the Feature Factory is a lot easier to be explicit and save me a lot of like thinking and needing to know some of the more particulars of SignalStore feature syntax.
Nice. Okay. So before, no, this is something we had already. Prettiness. No, that's also something we've already discussed. Sorry. Yeah, this was a nice statement, like the need for the SignalStore. So like Prettiness is arguing or suggesting that they are actually becoming a natural necessity if we're using signals. Yeah, I also see it like this. I mean, it's the signals are the foundation, but when things are starting to become more complicated, you want to have tools for that, for these advanced use cases. And in my opinion, the SignalStore could be one of them.
Yeah, same perspective for me too. Like all of these things could be like whatever thing, or it could just be signals in a service or some subjects in a service or whatnot. But I like how the SignalStore, like you don't have to do as much like the intermediate public-private thing as like a subject in a service where you have your settable stuff on the inside and then you make that private and then you name what you have your public version of. It's like as observable or as read-only in the case of like signals. And like, yes, you have public-private in a SignalStore, but instead of having a dedicated like settable thing that you make private, it's just you patch state it. And then theoretically, like most of the time, unless you explicitly say so, you can't patch state outside of a store, you know, if you have like a protected store. So it saves that and the deep signals and stuff like that. I've seen various like libraries like kind of like come up with their own deep signals internally because it's very nice to be granular on certain things and, you know, all this other stuff like this.
Yeah, and also Jason kind of agrees to that one as well. Yeah, I mean, we now know that from Angular we get the resource. We have some basic functions which can do the fetching for us, also the triggering of the fetching. We also know that in the future mutation might be a thing, might be supported by the framework itself. But in the end, on top of it, you also want to have something else.
Yeah, I'm very excited to see if you know, I don't know how or like if at this point like how something like that would pan out for, you know, mutative, you know, HTTP things and other things like routing, you know, forms. That's the thing I'm fired up about. if I'm not like one of like the first, if I don't know about like forms like the hour it happens, like I'm not alive. I'm like lost if that doesn't happen. But it's all in the future or whatever the sort of thing. But yeah, the future of things like resources or a resource like thing for mutations, however that works. I'm excited to see how things like this may extend from this.
Yeah, right. Or experiment with a resource to my CSS starting soon on a stream. Well, that sounds very interesting. CSS combination with resource.
Oh yeah. As someone who watches Jason, I was also working a lot on this stream, I think, when Jason was talking about this. So the most attention, but I wasn't your idea. If effectively, like you could have like an endpoint that specifies like, are you using this theme or that theme, or using this kind of like palette, and like having like the resource then like take that in and then like dynamically, from like hitting that, like, use the resource to then react to that. Yeah. And I was thinking something like that, and then maybe even the dynamic directives or the dynamic kind of component stuff, maybe in 20 would even be another layer of that potentially.
And Mark also heard you, so you will get a special notification when the signal forms are ready. Great.
Yeah, thank you.
Allowing users to modify. Okay.
Oh yeah, I can see that. Like I want this color or this palette for stuff like that. Post that off to an endpoint or something, or maybe your own like local storage store. Yeah, I could see that. That'd be really cool. I mean, ostensibly that's how things are, but resources in your implementation, I suppose. Yeah, that'd be really cool.
Okay. Good. I think we have, at least for now, reached the end. Mike, is there something else you want to show us, or?
Good question. No, I think to just sort of summarize, like beyond this stream here, I mostly, again, I spend probably most of my time in the Angular community just responding to one-off things on Reddit when people have questions. I mean, I could leave some really detailed questions. I think I have done content creation like before and stuff like that and gotten involved, but I like meeting people with like their questions like reactively and being like, hey, this is generally what I do. And then once I have that example, then I can then generalize it from there. So that's my kind of mentality with stuff. So if you have a question on Reddit, just ask and I'll probably respond to it, or you just DM me or whatever. And that's generally where I do the bulk of my stuff. But I'm on other platforms. I'm planning, now that this stream and this sort of effort for that, my next step is I want to write an article for Angular Space. It's kind of like a follow-up of my like reactive forms to like signals sort of utility that uses the interop extensively. I've even experimented with, I don't think the article is going to be about that, but I've experimented with a SignalStore feature that sort of exposes that stuff. But yeah, that's generally.
So you're not getting bored, as I hear it.
Yeah, there's always plenty of stuff to do.
I see. Yeah, well, we're looking forward to that article, and I can confirm if someone asks a question and the answer takes some time, then Michael is always one of the first ones to respond. So definitely. Good. Then I would say we have reached the end of our stream. As far as I know, there is always a tradition where I am supposed to ask you, Michael, what you are currently watching, playing, or I don't know. There is usually this tradition at the end of the stream.
Yeah, I loved when they did that too on Angular Air, and you mentioned Dragon Ball Z.
Yes.
And I decided that was your personality. Now, anytime I see Dragon Ball Z, I'm like, I wonder, what are your thoughts on Goku? So what am I doing right now? I outside of my involvement online, I just play a lot of games, just listen to podcasts. Current games I'm doing now is Fallout 76 is kind of interesting. They just added ghouls as characters you can play as. There's a different game called Nubby's Number Factory. If you're familiar with what is it, Plinko, or like Peggle, where you have a bunch of studs on the board or whatever, and then you drop a ball and you can hit them, and that gives you points and stuff like that. Nubby is like that, but the balls you shoot are factory workers. They're like, I love this, and you shoot it, and it pops these things, and random noises, and things blow up, and there's just, it's one of those games where you do stuff and a bunch of flashy things and a bunch of big numbers and very stylized, kind of a little bit of, it's interesting. But yeah, and I think ostensibly that also applies, Jason watching. I tend to play games like that too when Jason's going over stuff. So that's why I mostly drop puns on Jason during Jason's streams, because I'm probably playing a video game while Jason's being serious.
Okay. So, say that. Okay.
I love especially Sundays. That during Jason streams, but when's Jason ever serious? So just that, and I also like roguelike games, which are, I'm not going to describe that. If people know what that is, they know what that is.
I see. Nice. I discovered Severance. That's a series. I've never heard about it, but on TikTok I just saw a video about the best shows that somebody could watch. So I'm currently in the process of getting my hand to it. And also The Outsider. This is it appeared on Netflix. I think Netflix kind of publishes videos differently per each country. But it's with Jared Leto, if you pronounce it like this. So in Japan after Second World War, always also looked quite good. Yeah, and Jason is watching Archon. It's my current favorite. Yeah, probably I should also check that one out. Just heard only good things about it.
Yeah, that was Jason's obligatory "What are you watching?" kind of thing recently. And same topic, I was playing a game. I remember that. But it's a very chill environment there. So
all right. Yo, good, very nice. I think we managed to get through it a little bit more than we have planned, but this is always good.
Thank you for having me, especially for your
of course. Thanks for joining,
testing.
obviously. Yes, and also thanks a lot to the viewers who stayed with us very late. It's now more than 2 hours.
Oh wow!
Looking at the stuff that we've been doing was a lot of fun. I hope that we can continue that in the future. But for now, I would just say we're happy. Wish you a nice weekend. Let's see what the next week's win will bring. So losing already my English. Thanks and goodbye.